everyone, and welcome to Hearty Divination. I'm going to be doing a series of talks about asteroids. Now, there are thousands of asteroids within our asteroid belt in this solar system, and it's near the orbits of Jupiter and Mars. I'm going to be focusing on 5, and that is Pallas, Vesta, Juno and Ceres. Oh yes, and Chiron, but Chiron's actually classified as a dwarf planet. Now, Vesta was discovered by Heinrich Wilhelm, a German astronomer, in 1807, and Friedrich Gauss calculated its orbit around the Sun, which is 3.63 years. He named it Vesta after the Vesta goddess in Roman mythology. And sometimes we wonder, how do astronomers and astrologists assign names to particular planets and other celestial bodies? And it's usually on the basis of what is taking place on a national and international level during its discovery. But we all know that this can change, these definitions can change in terms of culture, perception, and historical era as well. But returning to Vesta, the goddess of the earth and the Roman people. You see, Vesta is an actual temple in the Roman Empire, or actually in Rome, Italy. And the temple had a sacred fire which must be burning continually. And the high priest had an all-female priesthood known as the Vestal Virgins, and it was their responsibility to keep this fire alight. They'd be chosen from the ages of 4 to 10 years old and would remain in service for 30 years and would remain virgins throughout. If they were ever to be seen as negligent and this fire goes out for some reason, it was considered a bad omen. Because obviously, for this fire to continue burning, it means that the people of Rome and the Roman Empire would be protected. That was the idea. But if any of the Vestal Virgins were to break their chastity, they would be buried alive and fed rations. So the punishments were quite severe. But there's this whole idea about this feminine energy, creative feminine energy within this sacred fire. And it was considered sacred. But when we think about the whole concept of fire and then the protection of the Roman people, these concepts are very ancient. We can go back to Egypt, for instance, where we have the deity Sekhmet, who is a lioness, often depicted with a sun disk around her head, symbolizing the eternal fire of the sun. And her duty was to protect the kingdom of Asar, known as Osiris by the Greeks, and to revenge any enemies of Asar. So there's this similarity there with the concept of a continuous eternal fire and the defense of a nation and kingdom. back to Vesta. So Vesta's basically an archetype. And that archetype represents anything that we're prepared to deny ourselves of in pursuit of an aim, goal, or ambition. It's what we're devoted to, what we put all our time and energy and focus into. So that could be a person, a place, a thing, or even an idea. It's that simple. But there's also this idea which comes along with it, you know, this idea of prohibition of human desire. The fact that we deny ourselves of our natural instincts and needs in order to pursue this goal. So looking at this now, when we think about Vesta placed in our birth charts, if you've ever had your birth chart done, you can easily go online and do this. There are many birth chart calculations websites available, and find out where your Vesta is. What house is Vesta placed in? What sign? So I'm going to begin with Vesta in fire. So that's Aries, Sagittarius and Leo. How does Vesta play out in the fire signs? So let's begin. Now the word Vesta is of Indo-European origin, which means to burn. So we have fire in fire when Vesta is placed in Aries. So you can imagine the level of passion in this placement. And that obviously applies to the other fire signs, Leo and Sagittarius. Vesta in Aries is someone, particularly in the first house, that is preoccupied with self-image and presentation. Great lengths are taken for self-improvement, whether that be through self-help literature or regular attendees at the gym. Let's not go there. Obsessions with the physical appearance leads to body dysmorphia. On the extreme, many victims of cosmetic surgery are found here. At best, you're in awe of the latest fads and trends. You know all the street slang and the formal etiquette if you care to exercise it. If you are not the Vogue man or woman, then you're actually the new wave. Got to keep ahead of the contemporary ways of being. If not, represent something socially credible at least. There's this impetus towards being the best I can be. You're conscious about sense of style and the impression made on others. It's a cry for attention. Especially when it comes to the opposite sex. The whole effort is a ritual that must be sanctified in the name of your public reputation. Suffering is not allowing yourself to just be. And when it comes to money, money can be an infatuation where possessions and materialism in general is glorified. The accumulation of wealth is not about quantity as such, but the capability to obtain wealth itself. You see, financial independence gives you a feeling of self-worth. Your keenness appears avaricious, a sort of greed which is beyond common sense and wisdom. You know, denying yourself a purposeful rest due to this hasty pace of life, chasing the buck or penny or whatever currency. Not forgetting those rash decisions made with risky investments that cost you a considerable loss. And the third house, Vesta in Aries, is much more advantageous, could we say. This is a shrewd investor. Stock market and trade could be an area of an expertise. Quick and astute thinking are the attributes with this placement, and a great asset for any business environment. You see, it's that assertive communication. That's your dedication here. That verbal self-expression is an art form. Many lyricists, rappers, and other public speakers are suited right here. There is a reverence for the spoken word. Vocabulary, vernacular, and tone are carefully chosen. A superiority complex is part of the eloquent speaker. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the most effective way of getting a message across, but simply more polished. There is an utmost respect given to the intellect. Using words as weapons can be second nature or habitual. Spontaneous, offhand speech, wanting to get to the heart of the matter in the midst of a conversation often causes confrontation. You forget about words can be wounds in a difference of opinion. And sometimes reasoning by means of honest logic is not better than communication from a place of the higher self. Utilizing emotional intelligence is what you need to learn in this placement. Or intuitive thinking, which brings about some sort of consensus or agreement. Don't burn bridges to prove unrelentingly the need to be right. Leaves us isolated without connections. And you are known to be strong-minded and forceful, seeking emotional gratification. This is how Vesta in Aries plays out in the fourth house. It's all about the fulfillment by having your own way. Tantrums and other unreasonable behaviors get the best of you here, especially if you have your moon in this house also. We're talking about someone who's emotionally out of control, or if in control, very manipulative. For instance, you're playing loud music. Just take your time back to when you was possibly younger and you've been asked to turn the music down or off completely. And there's a protest. And it's all about why you cannot relax and enjoy your leisurely time in your own home. You just want to be alone. And as a teenager, you were yearning for liberation from oppressive, authoritarian parents, or experienced emotional neglect as a child. Here, Vesta's on a mission to serve our own self-interests. So for those of you who like to defend your personal sentiments, this is a wonderful placement, because it's here where you get all your heartwarming desires. It's a person who knows how to stand up for what they need. And Vesta in Aries can be extremely hot when we talk of sort of fifth house. It's here where the creative inspiration is unleashed in a project or hobby. That eagerness for the thrills and excitement of living for the moment. Plenty time and energy and effort is put into works of art. For example, you may have a career in television, music, or design. This creative urge has permeated every aspect of your life to the extent that At night, you dream about that big breakthrough in terms of recognition and monetary gain. And if you have reached that level of success already in a creative field, then maintaining the position is consecrated. This is what you give your life for, and this only. Because there are many romantic enthusiasts with this placement also. And they're likely to fall victim to lust, where liaisons take on place simply for the thrills of an exhilarating experience. Refusing commitment in favour of fulfilling erotic desires. Of course, in reality, we need to settle down at some point in life. However, with Vesta in Aries in the 5th house, such an opportunity could be considered irrelevant because novelty is part of the intense appeal. This is also the placement of the hedonist and other revellers. A sense of mania exists along with the idea of having a good time. The readiness to let off steam requires an outlet, but hopefully in ways that does not have embarrassing or even worse, regretful repercussions. And on that note of romance, even on the one-to-one level, Vesta in Aries could be expecting adoration from their significant other. Unreasonable and selfish demands leads to the other person renouncing their self-worth. It's a tragic love affair. Or you could actually be the one that's infatuated with your partner, but the situation is unrequited love. There is an element of narcissism where the whole relationship evolves around one particular person. Although this placement gives you a magnetic quality, many people will be attracted to you with Vesta in Aries in the 7th house. Initially, problems arise trying to maintain an harmonious relationship due to the self-centered behavior. Similar relationship dynamics can be found between employers and employees, whereby the employee is obligated towards the dictates of their supervisor, manager, or company itself. Otherwise, they face unemployment. And on the subject of work, there's a possibility with Vesta in Aries in the 10th house that you're a female working in a male-dominated environment, or vice versa. Or you could have a chosen profession or job that is usually associated with the opposite sex. For example, a male midwife or a woman in the fire service, or in a senior position within a tech company. An earnest interest in getting ahead, meeting career goals has become a compulsion, especially if they are interesting aspects with planets in the 6th house. Work routines are regimental, and the idea of accomplishment is a matter of life and death due to being burnt out. And as a supervisor or manager, you abuse the position of power by bullying junior staff, such as an imposing unrealistic targets that are impossible to meet. If Vesta in the 10th house is aspected by discordant energies, pursuing ambitious goals could be frustrating due to whatever restrictions that may prevent progress. Trying to overcome obstacles such as lack of finance, education, or not from the right social background can be an issue. This is also someone that will be more by any means necessary, not caring about who they negate in the process to get ahead. It is the feeling of powerlessness and helplessness that fuels the determination here with Vesta in the 10th house. And as for the 12th Vesta in Aries is someone with aspirations for living a life other than the reality which they face. You question the nature of existence and how it can be improved to create an ideal lifestyle. There is a veneration for artists, scholars, and other intellectuals that denounce the status quo in order to escape the uncomfortable environment. Drug addiction is a possible option. Otherwise, you have an active drive towards spiritual development. A spiritual warrior who challenges lies, beliefs, and fears to find truths. Reaching certain levels of spiritual attainment in Buddhism, shamanism, it could be the Metanetu or any other mysticism is followed. It is anything which allows you to transcend the mundane and provide a deeper meaning to why we exist. This house relates to karmic debt from a previous life. 2. Self-sacrifice through altruistic service, such as the charitable works for the less privileged, as a form of an atonement during this current incarnation. Vesta in the 12th house in Aries only bears a problem if the sacrifice impedes balanced thinking, and therefore you become deluded. So that is Aries in Vesta, and I've mentioned quite a few of the houses, but your house could be placed, your Vesta could be placed somewhere else, and if it is, you could always look that up online or book a birth chart reading with me. Vesta in Leo is loyal to their aspirations and sense of entitlement. Egotistical like Aries, but in a more dignified manner. For them, originality is a distinguished persona that deserves respect within its own right and not as a measure with others. Whereas Aries views themselves as being ahead of the competition, Leo is above the league. Vesta can be a devotion to holding your reputation and honor, which is an extreme example. Someone that is focused on appearing as though they are an umpire of the game at all times. And this is tiresome in itself. A failure to do so is a bruised self-esteem. Defeat, shame, and embarrassment is not taken lightly with Vesta in Leo in the first house. Such a placement, after all, is the public image, which is courageous, bold, and an energetic person with an impeccable constitution and sturdy presence. Intense warmth and generosity is an agreeable trait, especially when it comes to hospitality. You make the perfect host or hostess. This is Vesta in Leo in the second house. There is an abundance of affection for others, which is true companionship, not possessive as such. A compelling need to be fulsome by nature, and in being so, you've met a fair share of sheep in wolves' clothing. But it's not be anything unmanageable. If you have Vesta in Leo within the second house, wealth brings security and prominence. Oh yes, there is a penchant for good living. Grandiose taste includes luxury items. As for attracting wealth, it's sheer magnetism. So an ostentatious mindset has you living above your means, which does not equate with financial stability. The finer things in life inspire self-importance, which is a glorification of materialism on the basis of egotism. It's misplaced prioritization of values and vanity in its purest form. Speaking of vanity, designer labels, antiques, art, and any other sought-after collector's items are of interest. And the vanity runs so deep that many of you with Vesta in the second house, or even the first, are likely to fall victim to false praise. Oh dear. The journey with Vesta in Leo is learning that self-esteem stems from the inner part of ourselves. The lesson is deciphering the difference between illusory desires and true needs. It's all about gaining enough knowledge to understand that self-love requires wisdom, self-worth is viewed from a higher perspective and not the conceited lower self. Here is the sacrificial experience of succumbing to the demands of the ego, results in suffering, although the tendency is disguised as self-preservation. And the communication tends to be magisterial in quality. Although there is plenty of swagger, it comes across as lordiness or big-headed. Yeah, we're talking about Vesta in Leo in the third house. And if this is not verbally, then it is definitely mentally. It cannot be helped. You have this knowledge and just know. Thus, whatever opinion or thoughts you express are credible and require consideration, regardless of other viewpoints. Self-assured and confident allows the fluidity of creative self-expression. Working as an actor, dancer, TV producer would be fitting for this placement. A managerial position is more than likely, or the appropriation of self-employment. And even though your charisma can be positively influence others to aspire to higher standards, the accompanied snobbery, pride and arrogance stifles those not so accommodating. Those who do not recognize the big heart underneath it all. And Vesta in Leo in the third house must resist haughtiness to get ahead in life. Sometimes we have to kiss arse before we can kick arse. That is the moral of this placement. To give oneself up to subordination can be empowering. Humbleness often proves more effective than being pompous. So Vesta in the fifth house in Leo can captivate any heart. This is a romance unforgettable. Prince Charming and foxy ladies are attuned to this placement. A genuine affair which is light-hearted and equitable, unlike Aries with an impetus for lust that is insatiable self-gratification. However, the concern is how much romantic life overshadows all else, and this is obviously amounts to nothing constructive in most cases. Romance is habitual for adulation, but not necessarily magic. If married or cohabiting with children, you are likely to dote on offspring and neglect your partner. Even though both of you were lovebirds in the beginning, or a single parent that puts aside love relationships due to overwhelming responsibility of children. If your sun sign is actually Leo too, and the sun is afflicted, Vesta could mean difficulties having children, such as infertility or issues that prevent parenthood. If not, you may raise children with burdensome health conditions. And the other alternative could be that you leave family and children aside to pursue some exciting interest or hobby, or something that you wanted to tick off your bucket list. So that's how it is with Vesta in the fifth house in Leo. But regardless of whether it is a friend, lover, employer or business partner, you expect loyalty and integrity in your one-to-one relationships. And the expectations are reasonable, but to command such treatment is despicable. It's a matter of free will. You know, everyone knows that to gain respect, you have to earn it at times. And Vesta seeks adoration and worship in love, or needs a lover to idolize as an employee or business partner in a business. Recognition and appreciation is gladly received, as well as the readiness to acknowledge where honor is due unto others. Relationships in general are venerable. The commitment is maintaining an equilibrium between everyone. So it's quite a nice and loving placement. Unlike Aries in the 7th house, which is more an obsession, this connection has much more respect and what we could say, equity. Nevertheless, if Vesta has difficult aspects with Mars, the focus is more self-centered and imbalanced, which is similar to our Aries in Vesta. And instead, the relationships are power struggles that deny the vulnerable one self-fulfillment. A perfect example of martyrdom, similar to the unrequited love as mentioned previously. And, you know, this could be not just unrequited love, but unrequited respect, if it happens to be a friendship or business partnership, whichever is applicable. And echoes, identical concerns are mentioned in the 3rd house. So we have a style of communication that can be condescending, at worst, you know, and authoritative at best. It is wise to adhere to the sound advice of being humble in pursuit of ambitions. It's the same rhetoric with Leo, with Vesta. And Vesta facilitates fortune and big successes in Leo in the 10th house. For those who are zealous about social status, you know, we have people here who are not exactly by any means necessary as we see with Aries, but more of a notion of claiming a birthright as a leader. It's fine, providing the importance of humility is upheld. Overconfidence bypasses the finer details where pitfalls are found. So self-control is the main discipline for Leo investor in the 10th house. You know, these are people that become cardiologists or work in the military. You know, you could be a leisure centre manager or something of that kind. If not, you are centre stage. And group participation and leadership for community activism and social change or the protection of cultural practices or purposeful causes if you have Vesta in Leo in the 11th house. There is a feeling of empowerment, sharing ideas and values amongst others that gravitate towards the same. Someone who has an unwavering duty for the social improvements. The danger is sometimes such actions become fanaticism rather than a virtue, but once taken out of context, it is fundamentalism. So you may advocate conservation of the natural environment, women's rights, diversity, equality, etc. Self-care is a concept central to the experience of Vesta throughout the zodiac wheel. If Vesta has complicated aspects, say in the 12th house, Vesta in the 12th house, this is an attribute of the personality which is larger than life, a mesmerizing disposition that is capable of enchanting those less conscious or even aware. grandiose in practical perspectives on reality, unrealistic ideas about being greater than they actually are. You might be a self-proclaimed guru or an ardent follower of faddy cults, ringleaders of organized crime which were underground or unlawful institutions that are disclosed to the public. The activities are not considered social norms. Having codes of conduct and ethics outside the everyday socially acceptable behavior. So, I think anyone with this placement, I would be very happy to hear any comments from you. And what is your experience of having Vesta in Leo in the 12th house? Because it's certainly a very precarious placement that could play out in many various ways. So that will be all for any of you are aware of where Vesta is in your birth chart and what is the experience. Similar to the fire signs Leo and Aries, the outgoing persona full of life and creative energy exists. There isn't a drive to be the best, more a willingness to emulate ideals. The sole difference being whoever you claim to be is not always who you are. This is Vesta in Sagittarius in the first house. Although blustering personality at times, you still want to be appreciated and be favored. This placement can be experienced in many ways, and of course the influence of other astrological aspects. Vesta is captivated by an ideal that must be lived or imposed on others. You see, Vesta in Sagittarius in the first house will be someone who considers themselves to be well informed and well read. Those who envisage their dreams from the earlier years of life have Vesta in Sagittarius in the first house, and they know exactly who they want to be from a very young age. The determination to succeed, or even the desperation, is viewed as being authentic, being them true selves. But if it's an impractical ideal, then it's fruitless. This optimistic personality is the representation, nevertheless. But there is a degree of pessimism which fetters. So complete freedom is not found. And for money, Vesta in the second house is what we could say a rough placement. This is someone who gives far too much and still can earn plenty. They intuitively know the energy of currency and live by the philosophy of give to receive. Not that a return is the anticipation. It's the universal or natural law that governs this type of approach to money. Generous to a fault, which includes themselves. You will not deny yourself a good thing once you can have it. Financial matters are not even given due respect. For you, spend while it's there. It's going to go anyway. Why not use it on something of value, worthwhile? Vesta in the second house in Sagittarius has you tending to financial issues at times. Managing money, as in budgeting, abandoning overseas travel, wining and dining, refurbishments, etc. This is diligence. That must be wholehearted to be effective. So not only can Vesta have you wasting money, Vesta can have you saving money in Sagittarius in the second house. It's also someone who earns a living in the hospitality industry, where social engagement in a leisurely environment is perfect. Hotels, restaurants, clubs, bars, etc. It is also for the spontaneous gamblers, the get-rich, risky schemes or other tendencies where hard-earned money is forfeited. No need to explore the sacrifice of financial or monetary loss. This could be a charitable person, committed to raising funds for those in need. So money is not respected for what it is in itself, but for what it can do. And Vesta in the 3rd house is about expansion for knowledge. And knowledge is a fascination in itself. Doesn't matter about the subject. Fervently supports intellectual freedom as a human right. All views must be allowed expression or at least acknowledged regardless. Exercising freedom of speech inappropriately could be self-destructive in both personal and working life. A reminder to think before we speak. A big mouth may have cost you employment or friends in the name of being true to yourself. So we have to be very careful when Vesta is in the 3rd house. Eagerness to learn and the inquisitiveness of mind keeps you mentally occupied. With countless hobbies and interests, curiosity kills the cat. Open-mindedness can leave you or lure you into ventures that prove devastating, especially when enthusiasm outweighs common sense. Here comes the daredevil. Here we have our bungee jumpers, our stuntmen, our submarine divers, astronauts, etc. If not, the experimental creative mindset, you know, the mad scientist or the deluded occult practitioner. Of course, the extraordinary genius can be discovered here too. You know, but the problem with this placement is poor judgment. That's the downfall when things go wrong. Attempting to fly without first learning to walk. And Vesta in Aries can slaughter family honor. A good reputation is substituted for liberty. This is people who have Vesta in Sagittarius in the 4th house. And it's about breaking away from family traditions or community norms associated with other cultural influences. You could become a black sheep in the family or an outcast in your community. These are the sort of sacrifices with Vesta in the 4th house. You will not encourage emotional dependence. Clinginess makes you restless. Since it's not necessarily a maternal placement, but one that understands or sanctifies a home environment that is comfortable, serene and luxurious. This is also a placement for lone travelers or want to live a nomadic lifestyle. The subconscious need to change scene, different faces, places and experience brings emotional contentment. This is done despite the instability it can cause. You see, the foundation is being true to your sentiments and authenticity. And don't need to reiterate the ideal or perfect partner. Love can be dutiful but not actually steadfast. When we talk about Aries and Sagittarius in the 7th house, although warm-hearted commitment is not compulsory, there is always something else more exuberant to direct your attention, or divert it, should I say. The romanticism of love, the quintessential relationship, prevents the discovery of true love because of the interference of philosophical ideals. This notion of perfection in relations can be applied to work, colleagues, and teamwork must be inspiring and harmonious. Trying to implement such a tall order in everyday life is wearisome. In reality, problems do arise, and Vesta has a vested interest to resolve them in the most resolute ways. We have to ask, can these philosophical ideas be put into plausible practice? That's the question. And there's plenty of ways in which Vesta can play out in Sagittarius in the 8th house. There is a myriad of possibilities. Self-empowerment and transformation is given impeccable strength. Situations require relinquishing that which no longer serves us to embrace the rebirth of something new. For instance, it could be preparing for the inheritance of a family legacy, such as a business, property, and investments. The responsibility enables the harnessing of personal power and authority to manage the affairs. No time for idleness or irresponsible behavior. Whereas previously your life had been carefree. This is the sort of imposition that could take place with Sagittarius in Vesta in the 8th house. Also, overcoming limitations in pursuit of spiritual advancements, taking drastic measures and leaving behind wealth replaced by humble living. This is the sort of sacrifices that can take place with Vesta in the 8th house in Sagittarius. A death of a relative or a close friend is an intense emotional experience that allows the development of courage and great resilience. The awareness of inner power during traumatic upheavals of any kind begins an alchemical process of transformation between heart and mind. Whatever the tragedy, death, financial failures, loss of materials or possessions, friendships, whatever it is that's endured, you shall surely rise from the ashes like a phoenix, with Vesta in Sagittarius in the 8th house. Gaining control of an unfortunate circumstance which endows capabilities never encountered before. Vesta is the aspect making a significant impact in the chart. So it's all about overcoming difficult circumstances. Vesta in the 8th house gives us the leeway to do this. And another thing, obsession is another in-depth energy. Fanaticism leads to disempowerment. This is where adopting traits from the opposite polarity of Gemini helps. Remaining objective and thinking strategically prevents such behavior. This could be eroticism, gluttony, manipulation, and many others. But as for the Vesta experience in the 10th house, this is an expansion and contraction dilemma. It's something where success could fall into your lap. It's a fortunate placement which guides efforts to assured accomplishments. People who establish fame or recognition in their chosen field, expanding boundaries such as the first female in a male-dominated profession, or someone from a lower social and economic background finds themselves in prestigious situations. However, the prospects can flip to limitations whereby career progression was put aside due to health issues or family responsibility, especially if there are aspects with the 4th house which support this revelation. Vigorous social activism is another thing. the commitment towards social change for the underprivileged, whistleblowers trying to institute new governance in a company or organization or educational institution. Vesta holds on to the notion that rules are guidelines in the 10th house in Sagittarius and can be amended in favor of a justified cause. Sometimes personal infringements are inevitable to bring about such transformations for the greater whole. Outspoken professionals that risk careers in service for the wider community and society. These are people that put their lives and work on the line for the benefits of others. And sometimes the consequences can be great, and sometimes it only brings strife and worries. But overall, a Vesta in Sagittarius is a very tricky. I would say that out of all the fire signs, it would be Vesta in Aries, which is best suited. But that's my opinion. Please let me know if you have Vesta in Sagittarius. I'd be interested to know. Please make your comments. So that will be all for Vesta in fire.